Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for your time and time for me. So I can be here in front of you, the all presenter of the International Seminar on Education and Human Technology, ISEHT, Universitas Negeri Semarang, Central Java Province, 2021. Thank you very much for giving me a time to deliver my presentation. I hope today all of you have a good day, and today I want to concern about my research on the model and management of Surau based on education expected by people of Minangkabau, especially in facing the globalization era. This research consists of 5 researchers. The first Associate Professor Safruddin Wahid uh, and Professor Solvema, and me, Assistant Professor Alim Harun Pamungkas, Wendy Ahmad Wahyudi, and the instructor Nurul Hayati. Okay, the background of this research is the first. The potential of Surau as an educational institution has begun to fit notice. As we know that Minangkabau in West Sumatra province in the past was an area yielding many figures, most of which obtained education from Surau. Surau, it means a smaller prayer space than mosque. Looking at the historical aspect, the Surau has produced figures with formidable characters admired not only in Minangkabau but also at national and even international level. However, the role of Surau as an educational institution has begun to be abandoned, crushed by the existence of school. It means formal education institution. The second background is the go back to Nagari or Bapulang ke Nagari as a movement to reconstructing the potential of Surau education as a concert step to improve the quality of education in Minangkabau. Education in Surau can be regarded as a form of both non-formal and informal education. Such educational path can also be regarded as non-formal education. The third background, it is impossible for everyone to go to school all their lives. The explanation, the concerning educational problems, many people are caught by a narrow view of education as if it can only be done by the school. It is often assumed that highly educated people are those who graduate from universities, whereas those who do not are considered poorly educated. Look closely, not a few people who did not even obtain university education can be regarded as highly educated because they have made great attempts to learn from their life, either through the channel of non-formal or informal education. There are many examples of figures can explain that who they even never finish high school. However, they can be said to be lowly educated. Conversely, those who attend higher education may not necessarily be said to be highly educated if they do not take lesson from real life, or the school can provide contextual learning corresponding to the demands of real life context. The fourth background, not everyone has a chance to go to school. For there are some limitations such as the rigid school system. It is impossible for everyone to go to school all their lives. Another weakness is related to the curriculum and the purpose of learning in school. The curriculum is always left behind with the development of science and technology. So what is learned today is not necessarily in accordance with future needs. Moreover, our educational goals today tend to be directed to learning to know, what it should be learning to do, and learning to be. Therefore, what the school offer is often not functional and even meaningless to life. Take, for example, the lessons about Minangkabau natures and cultures. Students can memorize the history and philosophy of Minangkabau, but they do not live them in their life. It is necessary to conduct education outside of the school system, using the non-formal education, I mean, and one of which is through surau in traditional educational background. Um, Finally, based on the ideas that have been put forward, it serves as the basis to look back to the rules of surau through the revitalization of the surau as an informal and non-formal education institution. It suggests that the effort should not uproot the surau-based education from Minangkabau cultures. Therefore, in a depth study on the rule, function, and model of surau-based education expected by society in globalization era, based on such a study, it's expected that it is able to produce a model of surau-based learning that can answer challenges of globalization. The objective of this research. Um, this objective is to formulate the model and management of surau-based education needed in facing the globalization. And then the literature review, seen from the history and culture of Minangkabau, as previously mentioned, the surau in the past served as an educational institution playing a major role in improving the quality of Minangkabau human resources to embrace the philosophy of adat bersandi sara, sara basandikan kitabullah. It means traditional should follow Islamic law and Islamic law should follow the Holy Quran. In line with that, the philosophy, in addition to being a symbol of Shara or Islamic law, the surau is a symbol of Minangkabau culture, reflected is the existence of surau in every nagari. It has hired to become the symbol of the nagari. In the past, surau not only served as a religious educational institution, but also as an educational institution of economic, politics, and even sport. Um, the method of this research is descriptive and collect by survey and completed by the depth open or close interview. And then I call this research is using mixed method between quantitative and qualitative, both of them. And the area of this research is 12 suraus located in West Sumatra province were selected as the sample of the study, and location in Luhak Nantigo. It means Luhak Nantigo consists of the uh, Tanah Datar district Agam and 50 kota, which is the cultural center of the Minangkabau. We call it, people in Minangkabau call it Luhak Nantigo. And the data obtained through structured interviews were analyzed by percentage, while the data obtained through in-depth interview were analyzed by sorting the data and compiling them in accordance with the objective of the study, the result of which were then narrated. Okay, and how about the result of this research? First, I would like to explain you about the learning objective. In the term comparison of surau-based education system throughout its development. In terms of educational purposes, current surau-based education operationally still maintains the same purposes of those held in the past, which is to make the student become those skills, virtues, and culture, particularly rooted in Minangkabau cultures. However, the number of respondents holding this view decreased by 58% compared to those in past, which is by 67%. Such a decline is due to fact the learning materials in Surah implies more on religious subject. The religious subject is also narrowed into certain elements such as focusing on reading the Holy Quran, for example, and relation to the shift in educational objective of the surah today. The majority of respondents state that the scope of educational in surah still covers several key aspects such as religion education, general knowledge, nagari culture, and practical life skills. However, the number of respondents holding this viewpoint decreased by 43% compared to those in the past, which is by 50%. In line with that, there is also change in the order of subject that the president's religious education, general knowledge, nagari culture, and life skills. And other hand, sport education is almost no longer implemented in Surau. Um, so the student, just in the past, it seemed that mm, through open interview, there were respondents who stated that learning activities in Surau are preferred for primary school age children. If students are graduated from elementary school, it is difficult to expect them to study in Surau because they are already very busy with their school tasks. Furthermore, through open interview, it is known that although there are teachers who sleep in Surau to control student behavior, most respondents were less confident in their ability to control the students' behavior. They stated that today it will be very difficult to find a charismatic teacher like in the past who will be sleep in Surau. Okay, the teachers. And how about the teachers in Surau? In the past, the background of the country of origin of teacher is not a consideration to be a teacher in Surau. Between 37% until 42%. Such a statement increased from 37% to 42%. The same is also demanded by responding regarding the role of teachers in Surau. They are expected to have the willingness and ability to educate. They are also required to be able to adapt the local community well, so their existence to as a teacher can be accepted by the community. For a sideline job, this was started by 70% of the respondent, whereas not by 56% of the respondent, the teachers need to have a religious educational background. But in a small percentage, there were some respondents saying that the religious education background is not so decisive. Rather, it depends on their expertise in accordance with the field of teaching they teach in Surau. Moreover, if the educational background to become a teacher in Surau was not an important point in the past, but it now seems to be more important. This is evident from the increase in the percentage of respondents who said from 35% to 42%. Furthermore, like in the past, before becoming a teacher in Surau, no special education or training is required. This was stated by 71% of respondents. Okay, we are talking about the funding and facilities. Today, the facilities available in Surau not by most 37% of the respondents include books and other learning tools in limited quantities. In terms of responsibility for the facilities, 33% of the respondents said that it was responsibility of the board. 31% of them said it was the responsibility of the surrounding community, and 16% said it was the people responsibility. Other parties that are expected to have concern for the Surah facilities are the commerce and the government. The government is expected to provide funds for it through the regional revenue and expenditure budget, or we call it APBD. or the state budget, we call it APBN. And the procurement of found and other facilities it now considered as the responsibility of the board, state by 43% of the respondents. Okay, now we enter to the result and discussion. In terms of educational purposes, current Surau-based education apparently still maintains the same purposes of those held in the past, which is to make students become pious, skilled, virtuous, and culture, particularly rooted in Minangkabau cultures. In accordance with the notion of a patron, it refers to a systematically structure from within which various components can interact and take place repeatedly. The pattern in this research refers to the structure and system of Surah-based education in which there are components that interact and can be done repeatedly in the future. The educational component include learning objectives, student, teachers, study time, facilities, methods, evaluation, and funding. And in relation to the understanding of the pattern and the model that has been mentioned previously, the Surau-based education needed by the local community in facing globalization era is developed from the pattern of education in Surau itself. It should be suitable to what is expected by the community as reflected in the information obtained through both open and closed interview. It is also reflected on the result of in-depth interview with experts in religion, education, and culture custom of Minangkabau about the tendency of Surau education models in the globalization era. All information obtained about the tendency of the Surau educational model was discussed by researchers team in our internal team to further formulate the expected trend of Surau model. And thus, it can be said that the formulation of Surah model that the community needs in the development of human resources in this era is the result of the LP technique. The model consists of the following component. This is the first. The purpose of Surah-based education in facing globalization era is create an education that is oriented to the building of human resources which are pure, skilled, and cultured, particularly based on Minangkabau culture. In accordance with the mentioned objectives, if today education of Surah is more focused on religious education, the coverage of education in Surah needs to be restored as the past. It should not only be focused religious education alone, although it is not necessary to be same as the past system. Education in Surah in facing globalization era should include religious education, Nagari cultures, life skill, general knowledge, art, and maybe sport. And it includes not only regarding writing Holy Quran, but also include the specific subjects such as Akidah, Sharia, Muamalah, because Sharia, Akidah, and Muamalah is they are the key component of Islamic teaching. Second, the learning materials of Nagari culture should teach about politeness, which encompasses manner of speech, table manners, tolerancy, humility, simple life, honesty, responsible as well. Third, in terms of productive skill education, so it's expected to play a role as a center of productive skill education activities. In this regard, the learning materials therefore need to teach a variety of skills that are suitable to the potential of Surau environment. And about the student, it is important for the student to feel encouraged in learning through Surau-based education. To this end, teacher is responsible to control the behavior of the student and also encourage them to attend school. In addition, the teachers are also responsible to help the student do their homework. Okay, about the teacher. For the teacher who have religious educational background, they are expected to be a person capable to answer the community's question related to the religion issues. For the teachers who are able to design a learning program, it should be noted that the program does not have to be designed for long-term and continuous learning activities. And that is the two kind of teacher, as having been mentioned in the previous section, should become permanent teachers. Although they already have sufficient formal educational background, they are still required to take practical training before becoming permanent teacher in Surau. In other hand, the teachers who are in charge of education activity design for short-term educational program and training are not required to be permanent teachers. Okay, we are talking about learning hours. This is so for the learning activities in Sorrow consists of various learning programs that are expected by local learning needs. And about the facilities, in short, the local government needs to provide various facilities that are both fun and educative. The responsibility regarding the management of facilities and infrastructures is submitted to the board. In the early stages, the procurement of various facilities and infrastructure can be budgeted through the regional revenue and expenditure budget or the state budget. For long term, if zakat uh, by Nagari can manage by Nagari, it is expected that some of the collected zakat can support the education of Surau. Nevertheless, it is ideal that the Surau-based education uh, dependent by utilizing a variety of potential that exists around the local environment. Take for instance, Surau-based education can establish various business units that not only can function as a source of funding, but also as a learning facilities for them. Okay, the learning approach, learning method, yes. Therefore, the teacher need to take a role as a facilitator. This is so for the source of learning material in the globalization era is not limited to teach and education institution only. The teaching strategies those need to emphasize the independent effort of learners in searching information and how they can analyze, utilize, and apply it to their life. And evaluation, the process of evaluation and the generative impact of the program can be submitted to the educational program designer in cooperation with the supervisory body of educational activities of Surau. Indeed, the evaluation of learning outcomes can be submitted to each teacher and student. And at the end, every organization of education activities in Surau needs to have planning, organization, implementation, supervision, and evaluation suitable to their needs. Each aspect can be explained as follows. Okay, like planning, organization, implementation, supervision, evaluation. And yes, this is the conclusion of this research. The conclusion of this research is the function of Surau-based education is as an educational institution that need to be maintained, developed, and improved. And the second, educational activities of Surau need to be viewed as non-formal and informal educational activities. This means that Surau-based education can be functioned as complementary, supplementary, and replacement or of formal education. The third, in accordance with the views and function of the second point above, the model of Surau-based education in facing globalization area is expected to be an interesting and a comprehensive center of community learning. It is not only concerned with teaching of faith, but also in all areas of learning which are based on Islamic teachings. The fourth conclusion, In the realization of Surau as an educational institution, as described in the point 3, it is necessary for modern education management to have planning, organizing, implementing, supervising, and evaluating based on management principle. Um, Thank you very much for giving me a time to present my research, and see you next time. Thank you very much.